Were you all not blessed as well as challenged by the lecture that Dr. Michael Eric Dyson gave? First of all, I want to, on behalf of our executive director, Dr. Deborah Hagins, and of course our president, Dr. Joseph Connors, want to thank you.
Thank you,
for sharing with us the aristocracy of your mind without losing the common touch.
Thank you so much.
And as you engage and you vacillated between the polysyllabic words and the language of the hood, you're considered to be right now one of the most recognized voices and thought leaders in America as well as in the world. And you have this national viewpoint and this international perspective on race, culture, religion. And so the first question I want to raise for this gathering is, what's your informed assessment of the black church? Has its role changed? Does it need to change? What can you share with us as far as your insights are concerned?
Well, thank you, Doc. Thank you for your kind words. And to Dr. Hagins and Dr. Connors and Dr. Hale and others. No, it certainly is a staple in our community. The black church is where so many of us were born and bred, reared, trained, transformed. Right? I come out the black church. All the stuff I do started in the black church, right? And when I started reciting things in school, but first in Sunday school, 3 and 4 years old, saying your little bit part, having the teachers affirm you, that was extremely important. And then my pastor came to my church at 12, Dr. Frederick Sampson.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
One of the greatest preachers, pastors, prophets ever. And he and Reverend, others who helped him, but especially him, were extremely constructive and foundational for who I am as a minister and as an intellectual. And I came up with Lance Watson,
Yes.
the coldest preacher come out of Detroit in the last 50 years. And so when I have that kind of pedigree, it's extremely important to remember that the black church gave us everything we had. It was an institution of education. It was a place where we could meet people socially. It reinforced our political ambitions and interpretations of the world. And it gave us a sense of how we should operate morally and ethically in contexts where our basic rights and our fundamental understanding of ourselves was challenged. So to me, it still is relevant. It still holds such power. But as I tried to indicate in my comments, we also have to challenge ourselves to meet people where they are. You know, when Jesus met the woman at the well, right? He ain't gave her no long theological disquisition about metanoia and transformation. He said, give me a drink of water.
Right.
But at the level of the bucket in the well, he begins to have a transforming conversation. And that to me is what we should do. We should meet people at the level of need and what they understand themselves to be, and then help transform that situation. But it means, if the gates of hell shall not prevail against it, that means we got to be out there knocking on the gates of hell.
Right.
It ain't coming to us. We got to go to it. And in that sense, we got to stand up and represent the gospel as best we can.
So if I could, Dr. Dyson, kind of ask you to elaborate just a little bit deeper as far as the church's engagement in the community. We're living in a time that many churches, African American, white, Hispanic, here in America, many churches are on the decline.
Yeah.
And it seems like, and Dr. William Curtis was extraordinary last night in his sermon when he talked about the unhewn stone not changing God or the altar of God to fit the culture. What is it that the African American church can do in general, and churches in the rural, suburban, and urban areas in particular, can do to have impact as far as the community is concerned so that we can maintain our prophetic relevance?
Yeah, that's a great point. But how you end it is critical. Prophetic relevance. Now, usually when we're talking about the church not giving into the culture, we're talking about personal and ethical issues of behavior, right? You heard me hit on the lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual,
right.
Or people think about how women should behave or should women have freedom to, right? We're thinking about don't let the culture inform us, while the culture is all over us in terms of what we think, and we think we're different from the culture. If you're homophobic, you're part of the main culture. The culture already in your church. If you are anti-feminist, and what I mean by feminist is the acknowledgement of the equality of women and the ability for them to exercise their gifts as God has called them, the culture already in your church, right? It's reflecting the patriarchy, the misogyny, the sexism. So it's interesting to me when people say, we gonna hold on to the old standard. You already all in bed with the culture that's reinforcing oppression to your people, right? Look at the right-wing evangelical piety that's being expressed now. Franklin Graham and all these preachers in bed with Trump.
Right.
Trying to use the gospel to justify and legitimate it. Right. And when Obama was there, oh my God, he was from hell.
Right.
He was horrible. He was misleading us. So what's interesting, when I hear people talk about don't let the church be seduced, I'll tell you how not to let it be seduced. Don't let its values of imperialism, of sexism, of homophobia, of hatred for poor people inform and influence your identity as a church. We are called to be a beacon of light, of love, of hope, of possibility, of transformation. And we got to get real smart about how stuff operates. If we see neighborhoods getting gentrified, what that means, economic policy, public policy, voting in local elections. You know, the right wing has been way ahead of us. If I say us, those of us who are people of color and others who tend to be more liberal at least, or even more progressive. They understand that election ain't just about the president, it's about who's going to get on the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
What kind of power they're going to have, and it's about the local, prosecutor who's going to be able to put your kid in jail or cut that kid some slack. And let me tell you something. Black people we're so good. We say if you do the crime, you do the time. Okay, that sounds good. White folk ain't doing that.
Right.
They don't let their kids suffer like that. Little Jimmy ain't sitting in jail somewhere, even if little Jimmy is jacked up. But black people believe it. We buy it hook, line, and sinker. You did the crime, stay there for a week, stay there for a month. No, you want to jack them up when they get home. You want to talk to them about X, Y, and Z, but don't let your kids fester under a criminal justice system that is inherently biased and racist against you. And when you vote, those are the kind of decisions that have local consequence, for your life. Not just who the president is, who the vice president is, who the senator and the congresswoman, that's all important, but the local stuff makes a difference. And if the church can't leverage its authority in such a powerful fashion to do what we see Reverend Sujay doing, what we see Reverend Hale doing, what we see Dr. Cosby doing, or Rudy McKissick, or Freddie Haynes, or Dante Hickman, these are the kind of Carolyn Knight, these are, Gina Stewart, these are the kind of folk who are embodying the best moral and political consciousness of the community, and not to get caught up in theological navel-gazing where we're trying to calibrate the efficacy of the church by determining how much of the sinful dominant culture in terms of how they wear their makeup or how they come on, stop. We got to be about something more serious and something more fundamental than that.
And that comment, Dr. Dyson, serves as a wonderful segue to another question I want to raise. Dealing with Christianity in America, unfortunately, many churches, many preachers are caught up in an Americanized Jesus, draped in the United States flag. Old Wesley Allen has a book out entitled Preaching in the Era of Trump. And I'm going to just say these three words, the Trump era. What do you sense is our prophetic role in the midst of a myriad of crises, social, moral, political, theological, ecclesiastical? What is our prophetic role in this age of Trump?
Yeah, that's a great point. First of all, we got to name it for what it is, right? Now, we got to call names. I mean, I do some of that sometimes, because sometimes ad hominem spices. But you got to have fundamental principles of public policy, of social analysis, of economic and racial justice, of gender justice, of orientation and sexual justice. You need all that stuff together. But the church in the age of Trump cannot be seduced, as you say, by the draping of the cross or the pulpit in the flag and being so un-American. I mean, who's greater as an American than Martin Luther King Jr.?
Right.
Right? And yet Martin Luther King Jr. carried the gospel to the world, but he did it this way. He wasn't trying to make America a Christian nation. He was trying to make America a just nation. Right, that's the difference. Because we want everybody. I mean, the founding fathers, mothers, and brothers who came to this country, when you look at it, when you read that history, in part were fleeing against religious intolerance and the tyranny of the Church of England, then didn't let other denominations come in. Like, okay, Church of England's cool, but can we get some Pentecostalism up in here? Now, it's interesting that the Disestablishment Clause allows every religion to proliferate, right? Because if Christianity can't survive, then Islam can't survive. If Islam can't survive, then people who read the Bhagavad Gita, the Holy Quran, the Tao Te Ching, right? In other words, you got to let everybody exist in their own tub, so to speak. And then you got to understand that Martin Luther King Jr., because of his Christian beliefs, was motivated to make this a just nation. Because there's some Christians I don't agree with. Why would it be a Christian nation as opposed to a just one? Do you agree with Franklin Graham? But he's a Christian. So we're supposed to agree with Franklin Graham but hate, I don't know, Louis Farrakhan. Right? We're supposed to, or an Islamic thinker who is critical of white supremacy and oppression, but oh, no, I can't get down with you because I'm down with Franklin Graham. Martin Luther King Jr. said, I go by your church sometime and wonder, what God are you serving? Who are you? You see, I believe God is an atheist.
Say more about that.
God is an atheist. God don't believe in your crap. God don't believe in this. God don't believe in the God you done made up. The question ain't whether you believe in God, it's whether God believes in you. Read the prophets of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. I'm sick of your altars. I'm sick of your incense. I'm sick. God is an atheist. Right? Because God doesn't believe in what you believe in the God you've created. We create. Paul Scherer, the great prophet, prophetic preacher, said, real worship is bringing the gods we have made to bow down before the God who made us. So for me, I think that I'm down with anybody who's down with justice, because justice to me is a reflection of the principle of love, right? To me, a Christian principle is this: justice is what love sounds like when it speaks in public. If you want to know the ethic of Jesus in public affairs, look for the just route. Now, I'm not reducing the complexity of African-American theology and the profound quest for justice to merely a secular conception of what justice is, but what I am saying is that we have become so deeply and profoundly indebted to a culture that we're not conscious of: imperialism, racism, the isms that block our conception of who people are, and we use the Bible to co-sign our bigotry. So we end up finding the scripture that says, oh, we don't like gay people, oh, we don't like poor people, oh, we don't like women, we don't want people talking, you know, we don't like these immigrants, God is for America. Stop all that. If your enemies are down with that, you ought to know you're on the wrong side. And why is it that progressive black people would end up agreeing with conservative white folk about some sexual orientation and about some immigrant, as opposed to a deep and profound commitment to justice? Now, some black people have been hoodwinked by an American ideology by saying, oh, it's them Mexicans. There ain't no Mexican.
Right.
I'm not saying there are no tensions between black and brown people. There is. There are tensions. But what I'm saying is that when you think about the fact, it ain't the Mexican, the Puerto Rican, the Dominican, it's the friggin' right-wing Republican who has obfuscated the possibility of justice for us. So let's not be seduced by using the Bible to justify and legitimate our theology to sanctify the kind of vicious, hateful impulses we see in this world, and especially in this country. So for me, our moral obligation is not to be, yes, the word is seduced, but certainly cooperating with and complicit with a dominant culture that would beat up on people, that would hurt and harm them. And for me, if you happen to be an atheist, or you happen to be a non-believer, or you are an agnostic, or you're a person of another faith, if you believe in loving human beings and transforming the world according to principles of democratic exchange, I got more in common with you than I get with some identity movement, white nationalist Christians who would kill me, who would strangle black people, who would lynch them from a tree, but because they claim to know Jesus, we supposed to be in the same boat. I don't know you, I ain't down with you, and that ain't my religion.
And Dr. Dyson, if I could, just to extend clarity, when you talked about God being an atheist, that concept of God, quote, being an atheist, because you know how some folks can take a little something and just jack stuff up. That your concept of God being an atheist is that the God being atheist is that God is not going to be complicit with the gods of the world that we have made.
Thank you for helping me in clarifying that. But I want to make Negroes nervous. God is an atheist. You're right. That's what I mean. But deal with that. God doesn't believe in your God. The God you have made. God disbelieves. God will not honor, acknowledge, submit to, or in any way become complicit with. You are much more eloquent than me in that sense. You're absolutely right. That what I'm saying is that God ain't down with that, right? But I'm also trying to probe us a little bit to make us a little bit more uncomfortable in the sense that, because here we are, a lot of us sit here, I believe the word of God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Slow down. Ain't nothing that simple. Right? You reading a book that's been written a couple thousand years ago, maybe more. You can't remember what happened last week. Did Josephine marry Robert and then you can't remember that. But you're taking a word of a word 80 years after when it got constructed. Obviously, there are complications. Now, a lot of y'all go to seminary, and then they tell you, don't let that seminary mess up your religion, and go to church. Negro, if you've been to school, act like it. Use critical intelligence. Now, don't make a fetish of critical consciousness. I don't do that. I'd rather be good than smart. At the end of the day, I'd rather people who do good than people who are smart, because some of the smartest people have been the most evil. But what I am saying is that wrestle with, I'm a biblical literalist. Okay, have you cut your right hand off? You ain't no biblical literalist. Stop. In a story, that ain't what you're doing. Have you plucked your right eye out? Because I know you've lusted. Have you done that? Then stop. Now, some people who got literal about it start drinking poison. That's keeping it real.
And they're dead.
And they are the former and dead and used to be alive. God gonna save me. No, Negro, that ain't gonna be no saving going on that day. If you're drinking hemlock, So my point is this, is that when I say God is an atheist, I'm saying to you that the creation of alternative deities, deifying our own specific form of faith or understanding of the world, I'm saying God is not down with that. That's what I'm saying. You said it more eloquently, but that's what I'm talking about.
The president, Dr. Connors, developed this theme for this year here at Hampton about the call to the church from a community in crisis. There are some who would suggest we need to flip that and say it's a call from the community to a church in crisis, where a lot of churches, again, haven't declined, young people aren't going, Dr. William Curtis last night preached about the unhewn stone and how many pastors are struggling trying to keep the lights on without giving in to the pervades of the culture. You talked about the church needs to get its prophecy right in your lecture, and that is the inclusion of people that sometimes those who are in power in our church don't want to listen to, particularly young people. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
I mean, you're going to die if you don't change. That's just what it is.
And talk more about change. Because people like progress, but they hate change.
Right. That's brilliant. You should be giving the lecture, man. I'm just up here. But you're right. Progress and change, right? I heard Manuel Scott. Remember Manuel Scott,
yes,
the old
sir.
man?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you pop the suspenders.
Yes, sir.
I tell you, the Lord. Right, what a great preacher. And I heard him preach once about the three wise men, right? And then they were going to see Jesus. But then, because of the threat of Herod, they had to go back another way.
Right.
And that black man talked about going back.
Another way.
Another way.
Yes, sir.
And he said, ain't no sense in talking about being better if you ain't different. Right? It's a challenge to all of us. And yeah, we got to. See, we tried, I'm sorry I missed Dr. Curtis, because he's one of the great theological expositors of the word we have. But you know, some people try to use, like, I'm going to resist, stand up for the church. You just trying to sanctify your bigotry and your arthritic, recalcitrant refusal to understand what God is trying to say to you. So I'm saying, if you ain't listening, because all the young people you listen to, they going to be older, so then they going to have to listen to the young people after them, and then they going to have to. Now, when I say listen, we don't mean like everything they want to do, we do.
Right.
It's how we are challenged, right? Think about the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, people get upset, oh my God, these young people, and yeah, sometimes they can say stuff if they challenge and they keep talking, you want to shut up. I get all that. But the impulse toward at least challenging and thinking critically and moving in a different direction. All of us claim, as you say, to like progress. We want to see the result. We want to acclaim the product, but we don't want to embrace the process.
Right.
Progress is the product. Change is the process.
Yes, sir.
If I can
Yes, sir.
put a tag on what you said.
Sir. Yes, sir.
And try to preach that a little bit. So people want the product. They just don't want to change to achieve it. And all of us got to change. When Jesus comes to earth, you know, if you're on the side of, no, we done this way, that's what the Sadducees and Pharisees were saying. That's what the established church, the established religious order was saying. Here you come up here trying to change stuff. We dig it the way it is. Believe it or not, when Martin Luther King Jr. came in town, he might as well have been Snoop Dogg.
Right.
He might as well have been one of these mumble rappers. Because the white folk were afraid of him, and the Negroes were scared of and for him. Why Dr. King got to come in here? We've been doing it this way forever. Why we got to change, right? And look at the bus boycott movement. When they first started, they ain't want much. White folk used to be able to sit on a bus, and if they were in a certain area, even if nobody was sitting next to them, the Negroes had to stand up. All they wanted was not to have to stand up if there was nobody next to the white folk in the area. But what did the white folk do? They wanted it all.
Right.
And they got it, baby. And then the bus boycott. So sometimes your enemy will determine more successfully the nature of your desire than you are.
Wow.
Right? They know already. Look, even if the Negroes didn't know what they wanted, the white folk knew. Oh no, because they starting with this, then they gonna want more. First they start with, honey, can I borrow your soap? Then next thing, they wanna borrow my car. Then next thing, you wanna borrow my life. Then you're here with me, right? So what they understood was, what the white resistive order understood is that you give Negroes a little bit, they're really asking to undam the whole process, and the waters will flood. So black people cannot be on the side of the very principles that blocked us from becoming who we are. And we don't even think about that. Now, I know when I hit the gay stuff, people, oh my God, that's so different. What's different? Here's the point. If you're using the word to justify bigotry, that's what white folk were doing. They thought that God told them black and white should not be together. That was a biblical principle to them. They could point out in the Bible, they told you God does not want black people to be equal to white people. They believed it with all of the theological virtue they could summon. We don't want to be that. We don't want to do that. So how do we figure out a way to maintain? I'm not saying surrender your moral and ethical orientation. I'm saying think, engage, pray, change, so that you can begin to understand others. And look, there's some stuff you do that your mom and them didn't used to do. That now they didn't want to do it, didn't mean that it was right or wrong. It meant that they did it their way, you doing it your way. There's a difference in that. So progress is extraordinarily important. The cumulative result of the efficacy of change is progress. The process that hurts, that strips us, that determines, right, that we will be in tremendous discomfort is what change is. And so I think as the church, we got to think seriously about this. We got to look at it in a very serious way. But don't seek to hide yourself from the imperative to change by claiming that it's a secular world that's trying to destroy you. Think critically about the application of your faith to a broader set of principles that allow you to transform them in the same spirit that has always abided with our people.
Wow, wow, wow. Dr. Dyson, you have been extraordinarily impactful today. And whether folks agree or disagree with you, one thing you have done is you have caused folks to think and to wrestle.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And that's great.
Thank you, sir.
What would be your parting words to this Hampton gathering as we get ready to go back to our homes, to our communities, and to our churches to challenge and meet these crises with the love of Christ?
Well, I tell you, I love the black church. I'm rooted in the black church. It is my home. But you know, the great late theologian Robert McAfee Brown said that the church is like Noah's Ark, right?
Right.
If it wasn't for the storm on the outside, you couldn't stand the stink on the inside, right? Now it's stinky. Oh my God, foul, odoriferous, horrible, but it's an ark.
Yes, yes.
It's a carrier, it's a vehicle.
Yes.
For something profound.
Yes.
And if it's stinky in here, there's a storm outside that is brewing, that is destructive, and that those of us within this ark need to join hands and to love each other more. Because it don't make no sense of saying when we get to heaven how we gonna act if we can't do it right here. And if we can't love each other and embrace each other and understand that we have a precious privilege. The church is not owned by us, right? We are caretakers. It's like the difference between a government and an administration. See, Donald Trump got it twisted. I am the God. No, you ain't. You're gonna be gone, hopefully in 2 more years.
Right.
But surely in 4. Obama was great, he gone. Clinton was great, he gone. If you love Reagan, he gone. What remains is the government. Administrations come and go.
Right.
Preachers and deacons and choir members, y'all come and we come and go. But the church remains.
Yes.
And so the gift we want to give the church is the ability to reimagine its future in light of its best principles. You know, So when you're on a plane, they tell you that the closest exit may be behind you, right? So sometimes we got to look back and understand what our history has given us. But it also says when you go after the plane lands to get your luggage, be careful, because some of it done been moved. Turbulence has shaken it, altered where your luggage might be. So when you find it, understand it might have been shaken up. And then finally, when you get downstairs, if you done claimed it downstairs, be careful about taking your luggage, because it might look like somebody else's. Be careful about what theology you picking up and what ideas you're trying to absorb. Understand the integrity and authenticity of our tradition, which is always about love and about freedom from oppression. It's about challenging the dominant culture. That's what the bottom line is. You know, recently somebody released another article, and I've written 2 books on Martin Luther King Jr., saying some stuff about Dr. King. And again, Negroes are mad when I wrote my book about plagiarism and adultery. The reason I want to get ahead of that story. Because when those tapes are released in 2027, dog, it's going to be some stuff on there. But if we already done said, I don't care what's on there, let's acknowledge that he was human. Let's acknowledge he was limited. Let's acknowledge he was 39 years old when he died. He was a kid. He was young. And yet he surrendered his life to God to become a vehicle for transformation that makes what we do possible. So the word I would leave the church is that it's stinky in here, but there's a storm out there. So let's love each other and embrace each other and try to change so that we begin to more effectively and relevantly address the world in which we exist, and therefore embody the spirit of the God we claim to love and serve.
Can we put our hands together for Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson? Come on, let's celebrate him. You have been great, and you have labored hard. Thank you so much. Come on, put your hands together. Let's give God praise. Dr. Coleman, is there anything that you need to share before we leave? You want me to close us out? 7 o'clock, the concert will be tonight at 7 o'clock. We invite all of you to come and hear this wonderful gift of music that will be shared. Let's close out in prayer. Would you mind closing us out in prayer? All right.
Almighty God, we are grateful for the gathering at Hampton of ministers, of evangelists, of lay people, but above all of us, seekers, believers, those committed to your will, your word, and your way. We ask that you would continue to bless us. The difficult things we have heard, allow us to meditate upon them, like Mary and Joseph, pondering what angels say. We ask that you would give us a sense of commitment to you, the sense that you are with us, the cosmic companionship, as Dr. King said. Let us feel that. But above all, Lord, let us love each other in sacrifice. Let us love each other without judging or harming or hating or denying, but being vehicles of your grace, your mercy, your truth, your passion for justice. Now bless every one of us as we go to our separate homes, but unite us in the final home of our commitment to your word and the love of God on this earth. These and other blessings we ask in your most hallowed and holy name. Amen.